Alright, this tutorial will be about how to use the 3D cursor, which is this little bullseye thing that you've probably noticed whenever you're in a 3D file. So let's talk about what that actually does, rather than just thinking of it as something weird that happens when we accidentally left-click on something instead of right-clicking. So we can think of the 3D cursor as the center of wherever we're working at the moment. So if I put the 3D cursor on there, then if I add something, let's say I add a sphere, it's going to show up at that point. It's going to show up exactly where the 3D cursor is. So if I put the 3D cursor over there and then add a metaball, it's right there. So we can use that to guide our workflow. Now, it can be pretty difficult. Like if I click over here, that's just kind of an empty space, so it can be a little bit hard to know where exactly the 3D cursor is. So we can control it more precisely by going into our side menu here, and if we go to View, we have some options for the 3D cursor. So we can change the location by sliding these back and forth, and we can rotate it also. So we can use that to precisely place objects, but we can also use it to set the pivot point for an individual object. So right now, the pivot point for that sphere is the center. So if we were to rotate that, it would rotate around the center, which makes sense. Now this capsule over here, let's imagine that we are making like a sword or something that's going to be swung along the edge. So got something resembling a sword blade here. So it's not going to, if you rotate a sword, one end is in your hand, so you don't want the pivot to be in the middle, you want the pivot to be at one end. So what we can do is we can move the 3D cursor to the end here. So I can click there. Yeah, that's about where I want it. I could make some fine adjustments over here if I want. But then I can go Object, Set Origin. So we want to set the origin of the object to the 3D cursor. And now we can see when we rotate the object, it rotates around that point. And even if we move the 3D cursor somewhere else, the pivot point for that object is permanently fixed there. Now let's say, for instance, on this cube, we want the pivot point to be at one of these corners. Now it would be pretty hard. We could try to click and get that exactly on the corner, but that would be pretty difficult. So what we can do is we can use the snapping. So since we want to select part of the shape rather than the whole shape, we'll need to go to Edit Mode. And in Edit Mode, we can make sure that we're in Vertex Select rather than Edges or Faces. So we can select that corner. Now we can, if we go to Mesh, we can snap the cursor to whatever we have selected. So now the 3D cursor is exactly at that corner. And then when we go back into Object Mode and set the origin of the object to the 3D cursor, oh, I need to have my cube selected. So I'm going to set the origin of the object to the 3D cursor. Now the origin of that cube is at that corner, and when it rotates, it'll rotate around that corner. Now, if we were to open up a 2D file, now in a 2D file, remember, it still is three-dimensional. We're just looking at it from the viewpoint of the camera. But by default, we can't see our 3D cursor here. So even if I go to set my 3D cursor somewhere, I can't see it. In order to be able to see it, I have to go up here into the View menu and turn on the 3D cursor. So see how now it's right there. So I can set it here. Let's say I want this to pivot around that point. So then I can go to Object Mode, set the origin to the 3D cursor, and then when I rotate my grease pencil object, it'll rotate around that point.